I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat, couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who'll listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe.
Last stand, and I came to deliver. Been called a Clinton operative, a Russian, and a grifter. By libs, a Washington student debt, proud to be an intern, sucking up to pigs who get a tax cut in the midterms. You cut the ties but never heal the wrist burns. Capitalist shackles wrap and penetrate like ringworms around the necks of those whose deaths will not affect the king's purse or the coffers of the company the king serves, who manufacture mandated tinctures. They're safetied out of hanging from a fixture, half a mile skyward, just dangling from the rafters. My grift is sobbing till I'm cackling with laughter. I guess I would have made a decent actor. I'd be great at crying on command until they cut plus 40 minutes after. When the director waves a hand, it ain't a rap, it's now a legal matter. Honey, my grift is weeping on a mic until I'm hacking up airstrike verses like it's bombs away and batter up. Swinging on these bigots, they keep killing us to fatten up. Kill the switch, eat the rich, I think they're finally fat enough. Grab your knife and fork, the world is yours, just say you've had enough. And if you're comfy, you could go ahead and laugh it up. Tell me how the most important vote I'll ever cast is like the choosing of a bus, in that it might not take you anywhere you want, but no one can deny the fact the bus is now no longer where it was. And that's the kind of progress we should celebrate and trust. Spoken like a kid who never took a bus. Spoken like a piece of shit that used some cash to mask his stink and truly thinks he's one of us. Spoken like a terminally unserious person who equates our cries for rights to mixed up orders from a server. It paints a privileged picture of what you would label urgent if the worst thing you've experienced in life has been the time your waiter accidentally brought a tray of gold flake scallop when you clearly ordered gold flake urchin. And now you're storming out the restaurant and hopping in a Tesla. You got 80 pounds of Tony Fauci merchant.
Rewind to chains won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride. Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
To place your bets on weaponizing the identity of every limp progressive claiming grassroots integrity. Policy is a slippery slope for all of its complexity, so flex your brave resistance with this Ilhan Omar NFT. Numbered one of 723. Each depicts her valiantly championing a bill before she lays it at a donor's feet. And she can throw her hands up in the air with AOC and say if only Nina Turner could have voted present too, that's why we need another seat. We need some more progressives we elect to only tweet, who live to serve humana and their label of elective slapped on every patient's gravest needs. And every station plays the theme that medical professionals agree on the effectiveness and safety of injections authorized for this emergency. And in purely unrelated news, the profits of the ones who manufacture vaccines just increased by nearly 36 billion with a fucking B. Sometimes it feels like we're the only ones that see. Sometimes it feels like all of us are lost at sea. And every time we think we see an island on the tip of the horizon, it turns out to be another measure making sure we're kept within the watchful eye of murderous authority. And so I guess my grift is crying for the future they denied us, where the people who would buy us are a mockable minority. And we are more than genomes under warranty. And we are more than serfs in constant quarantine. If I had a single breath left, I'd let the chorus scream. I'd announce our leaders claiming none for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me. None for all and more for me.
Rewind to a chance won't make you wait in such a long line. Life's not just a way to waste your free time. Air that's fit to breathe is not a free ride. Free ride.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? Hi, everyone. It's Tuesday night again. We're here. It's Indy. It's Indie News Now Live. And we're going to talk about some stories and some angles that I think a lot of people don't talk about. That's what we do. We amplify independent journalists here, people that you will not hear on corporate media, thankfully, and I'm very proud of that. We are live on Indie News Network, INN. We're also live over on Substack at Indie Media Today. We are live on 9 different platforms, believe it or not. YouTube, Rumble, you basically can think about it. Plus, we even self-host at the same website that is the name of the show. Indie News Now Live is IndieNewsNow.com. So if you go there, you actually can watch live. There's a whole watch live section. There's a merch section, so you can buy merch as well. And yeah, so welcome. And we've got a big lineup of stories tonight to read. This is a little bit different of a show where we actually do read through the entire article, comment on it throughout. And Fred is saying that he's not wearing pants. Well, that's completely up to you because you're not on camera. Same with me, but I am wearing pants. I'm not going to do a pants check, though, to prove it. I'm wearing pants, I promise. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to talk about this crazy story, what's going on in Iran, and is it for Israel? Of course it's for Israel. Well, they said it wasn't for Israel, but now they're saying it's for Israel. So we're gonna go through all that. We're gonna bring our friend the dissident for that and Simplicius, and then we're gonna go to a bunch of Indie Media Award honorees. All right, we like to amplify the best of independent media, and that is from, say, Amanda Weiss to the Unicorn Riot is going to be featured tonight. Antiwar.com. Robbie Yeager. We're gonna go check in with our friend Robbie, see what Robbie's been up to. And of course, we're gonna talk a little bit about our friend, another Indie Media Award honoree, Shanda Masta, who we've been talking about all month. So proud of all that. Again, we're gonna amplify a lot of independent journalists tonight, and we're going to talk about Peter Thiel and what's going on, how they've put J.D. Vance together in so many different ways. This is just one angle. Dissented Bloom's doing a tremendous job, just tremendous, to put together all the pieces of how J.D. Vance was assembled to end up where he ended up, given that he had a limited political experience, but he had a couple of pretty powerful benefactors that made sure he was in the right place. The Sense said that she's wearing pants. She's here in chat also. I'm happy to hear that. Hey, it you know, as Kit likes to say, if it's your day off, dance off, pants off. I mean, that's your prerogative. You know, if you, yes, and Steve is saying he's never wearing pants. So everybody has their own. Yeah, no legs. See, I'm disembodied, so I have no legs to put them on. There you go. Funny. So we, yeah. So support independent media because we need it more than ever. We are user funded here. We do not take corporate sponsorship at all. We do not really take any advertiser money. We don't pay to get any clicks or any views or anything. We rely on you to share the show and to support us with contributions and tips so that we can continue to keep the lights on and do our live streaming and make our thumbnails and do everything that we do. Those people already have done that, and we appreciate them. And I look at that board every single day, and I really appreciate all of them. Cash App, $ Indie News Network, co-fi.com/Indie News Network. At paypal.me/Indie News Network. That's for a one-time thing. Patreon.com/Indie News Network is for monthly. Website at IndieNewsNow. There's a Keep the Media Free section where that's a Stripe link. You can hook it up with any credit card or any way you can think to pay there. And then Substack. We're live on Substack at IndieMediaToday.com. I also publish over at INNNewsletter.com. We were live on Sunday night for boats smashing into other boats over there. Thursday night, we'll be live over there for a live American tradition with Jesse Chet. At least we're scheduled right now. I'm hoping. You know, my fingers are crossed. We have a whole plan for what we're going to do. And so join us there at INN Newsletter. So subscribe to both places because it's completely different content pretty much at both different places. And everything's free. All the content is free. Support if you can. Please share the show even if whether you can or you can't. And that really makes all the difference to us. Cowboy Kitty's here in chat. Good to see you, my brother. Any update, anything new, it would be helpful on your sister-in-law, Natalia. We've been talking about her story. I'm going to, of course, show the GoFundMe later on tonight. So anything you can do, any information, any update would be helpful if there is one. Appreciate that. So we're going to talked about Substack. We're going to cover several Substack articles tonight. The first of which is... let's go here. All right. I have been following this journalist for quite a while now, since she was at AJ Plus. And I liked the videos that she used to do, and she mostly narrated them, and they were highly produced, and they were really good. Her name is Sana Saeed. She went on her own, and literally she named her Substack Views My Own, but you can find it at Sana Saeed, first name, last name, .substack.com. She wrote a long article that I'm going to ask you to bear with me. And I hate talking about the duopoly. I know this. And what this is this is a study in how do people get sold on coming back to this bullshit every single time. And she's using this in the context of Obama and Mamdani, like having this little thing in front of the kids and trying to wow a whole group of people that don't know any better. And she wants to kind of bring it back to be like, what's going on here? So she's looking at the charisma of empire, Obama, Mamdani, and the erosion of accountability. All right, the charismatic leaders of empire don't save us. They polish the gravestones, and that's absolutely true. And you can actually listen to this article at her Substack if you want to. I don't know if she narrates it or it's just the AI stuff, but it's really helpful sometimes if you're like, working out or something else, you want to listen to an article. I like it. And sometimes what you'll find is that an original version is the one that was read and transcripted, and it's different from the one that you actually read. And you can almost see where the changes were made and the updates were made. And as a reader, I kind of find that kind of cool, and I'm a dork for that. And I understand. I appreciate that. All right. You listen to audiobooks, not articles. That's okay. But you can also listen to articles. Again, to each their own. So the intoxication of charisma, she starts by saying, and now, by the way, this is something I'm actually going to mention in our next Indies Tech Tips. You can now add a drop cap, which is the large first letter of your first paragraph to an article. Substack added the ability to add a drop cap to your articles. Okay. I'm not immune to a charming man. Okay. A curse that's followed me for much of my life. Thankfully, I have not really been quite as taken, but I understand what she means. Charisma is, after all, intoxicating when presented in tandem with hints of humility and kind, playful mischievousness. In its presence, not only does it present itself as seeing you and only you, in the midst of whatever surrounding noise there may be. But it grounds pacing feet. It calms a pacing heart. To be in the presence of a charismatic man is to feel, even if briefly, a sense of self. A self uninhibited by whatever burdens weigh on your shoulders and mind. And I will again reiterate that I have been in the presence of people like this, men and women, dynamic people that kind of you get swept up. I understand what she's saying. Who charismatic people. And so I understand at the most base level what sort of an emotional impact the image of President Barack Obama and Mayor Zohran Mamdani singing childhood songs to a group of young, adorable children had on the millions who saw those videos and images. Especially as we continue to collapse deeper and deeper into fascistic decay with no real escape route. Obama, for tens of millions of Americans, represents perhaps the last great president, unencumbered, as his mythology goes, by scandal or mistakes beyond the tan suit. He ran on a platform of hope and change, and for many, he delivered. Even if all they can name as achievements remain confined to his personality, identity, charisma, and the appearance of progress, and the implementation of a Heritage Foundation plan that they sold as a lemon to the public as a giveaway to the insurance industry. For tens of millions of Americans, Mamdani represents something similar, but simultaneously a big break from the legacy of Obama's Democratic Party and ultimate failures. Mamdani's campaign was also a message of hope and change, but one which explicitly broke away from the corporate Democrats. Kind of agree to disagree there. One which explicitly condemned and named a genocide. Okay. His was a campaign and message which explicitly spoke to the exasperated and exhausted groans of the working class, of a generation promised everything and burdened with the gift of nothing. And there's the photo op of them sitting in front of the class, having a good old time yucking it up. But the thing with charisma and with charismatic men is that they often disarm you just long enough to make you forget what you should be questioning. They, even if momentarily, put you at ease just enough so that scrutiny and accountability are collapsed into feelings. Now remember that the 2024 election was the vibes and feels election. They literally anointed Kamala because of vibes and feels. And so what we're dealing with is not just charm, as you and I colloquially understand it, but power. And specifically as a force that reorganizes judgment itself. Max Weber talked about what he called charismatic authority, which wasn't authority grounded in law, tradition, or even moral good, but in crisis. It's an authority grounded in the belief that a leader possesses exceptional and at times even almost sacred qualities that his followers, who give him that near sacrosanct authority by attaching themselves to him, see as promising clarity and redemption. I don't know if she realizes she's also describing how Trump supporters see Trump, even though we don't. This especially happens in moments of crisis, when institutions are seen to have failed and when uncertainty of the future worsens. Destabilization of society and politics creates a destabilization of the self. And there really is no better example than Barack Obama's 2008 election. Hope and change felt God-sent after 8 years of now watch this drive. And I feel that too. I felt like he was going to be president. I rooted for him. I voted for him twice. I was a fan. Mamdani's accent too, or ascent, not accent, but his ascent exemplifies what Weber wrote about. He emerges from an anti-genocide, pro-Palestine movement in a city whose repression became emblematic of the national repression of anti-genocide, anti-Zionist dissent. It also, by the way, is the city that has one of the largest populations of Zionists in it. So there's that. Taxpayers have seen their rent, their groceries, every facet of life get more and more expensive, while billions upon billions of their hard-earned tax dollars have been used to fund and armed the slaughter of Palestinian, Lebanese, and Iranian children by a parasitic client state. All of this, in addition to the growing tech billionaire oligarchy, which continues to make sure that every day in this world, okay, that it's worse than the previous day. And then we've got Obama over there. But the other thing with charisma is that it doesn't change who you are ultimately when measured against the backdrop of good versus evil, against the backdrop of material realities versus affect. Not effect, but affect. I would also point to Eric Swalwell, who's not mentioned in this article, but he, a lot of people felt, had charisma. I never really saw much of that, but that was, he had this aura and mystique about him, which was why everybody stayed silent for so long. So to continue, and so President Barack Obama is a war criminal. And before you dismiss this as hyperbolic, here's a different phrasing. Obama was one of the most consequential presidents for reordering American violence and war as so constant, so clandestine, that we collectively don't even look back at his presidency as one of the most violent and destabilizing tenures of the past 50 years. That he is still looked upon fondly. That he can still use his charisma and nostalgia in the way that he did in the recent photo op with Mayor Mamdani tells us how the power of charisma lies in its ability to dismantle even the discourse of accountability. Mamdani himself had been critical, highly critical of Obama for years. You saw that photo op. They're all yucking it up. So here we go. She's going to go in on Obama now. Turns out I'm really good at killing people. Didn't know it was going to be a strong suit of mine. The moral and legal crimes of President Barack Obama are innumerable, both domestic and international. But I want to focus here on a segment of his most consequential crime, the reconfiguration of American violence. Remember, Standing Rock happened under Obama, too. Barack Obama oversaw the unprecedented expansion of the drone warfare and special operations across Pakistan, Afghanistan, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Syria, and Libya. Leaning on that 2001 authorized use of military force, he didn't just continue the war on terror that he had come to save us from. He stretched it across continents, transformed it into a borderless, permanent system of covert war. Across multiple theaters, this approach killed civilians, it destroyed infrastructure, it displaced populations, and fractured political life. Weapons and fighters moved across borders, contributing to the expansion of sadistic non-state groups such as ISIS, or ISIL, or whatever he wants to call it, Daesh, or whatever, while the U.S. simultaneously claimed to be working to contain them. I remember all this. I was there. The result was not the end of the war or the end of war, but its reconfiguration into, again, a continuous transnational project of destabilization, which continued long after his own exit from office. And he also set up the powers that his successors ended up even further stretching. One of the foundational ways in which he undertook this violence was through drone strikes, institutionalizing signature strikes that targeted people based on patterns of ill-defined behavior rather than confirmed identity, effectively collapsing the distinction between suspicion and guilt, or more accurately, perhaps, between proximity and guilt. And she's got examples of this. Entire regions were turned into what can only be described as kill zones, places where people lived under constant aerial surveillance. Sound familiar? Where the buzz of drones signaled not just observation, but the specter of death. That sounds a lot like Gaza, hauntingly. By the end of his tenure, Obama would have overseen 10 times more the number of drone strikes than his predecessor, George W. Bush. Well, I think part of that is because of the growth in drones, but still, it means something. And one of the greatest tragedies of this violence was how unnamed and unknown its victims remain. Names and identities aside, there are also no definitive final tallies on the number of people, including civilians, killed in these drone strikes. And that was by design, because the numbers we do have from various sources are built on fundamentally different definitions and data sources. And part of this, and she's going to mention Snowden coming up, civilian casualties, which included so many children, weren't anomalies. They were built into the logic of the program. Again, sounds like Palantir. The reclassification of military-age males as presumptive combatants alone tells us how the threshold for killing was lowered to clean up the numbers and legitimize the mission. How many innocent civilian males that they classified as presumptive combatants could there have been? All right, then there's a thing from the New York Times here. I'm not going to read this whole paragraph here from 2012. Here's a Banksy. Okay. Getty Images. Clearly, that's a Banksy. The Obama presidency's expanded, rebranded war on terror also extended to the assassinations of U.S. citizens. In 2011, Obama authorized the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki without charge or trial, in clear violation of his Fifth Amendment rights. In the same strike, another American, Samir Khan, was also killed extrajudicially. Weeks later, Obama authorized a separate strike that killed Awlaki's 16-year-old son, Abdul Rahman. Under his administration's classification of military-age males, and Abdul Rahman, despite being a child, was one. These assassinations weren't aberrations, but extensions of his executive claim to unilateral extrajudicial authority over life and death of anyone deemed in the periphery of an ill-defined threat. Power got to his head. And it was all formalized through secret legal memos and internal kill list processes reviewed within the White House. And very often Hillary Clinton had access to that list as well, I would guess. And so this entire architecture of violence was mirrored domestically through the expansion and normalization of mass surveillance. Again, Palantir, flock cameras, as well as the expansion of the DHS and FBI informant and entrapment project, but she'll save that for another day. And here she talks about the Snowden leaks that exposed a vast system of global data collection, phone records, internet activity, communications, operating at a scale that redefined what state surveillance looked like, setting the stage for all that would continue to come long after his departure. Again, I also, by the way, with the drone stuff, I forgot to mention Daniel Hale, who went to jail for whistleblowing that 90% of the kills that we had from our drone bombing program under Obama murdered civilians. He went to jail for that, but they never denied that it was true. The tyranny with which Donald Trump rules is a tyranny long baked into the office, not starting under Obama, but certainly strengthened, especially in the realm of extrajudicial unilateral violence. Think Maduro and what they did to Maduro. And yet none of this seems to follow Barack Obama. The record is public. The violence is documented. None of his moral and legal crimes against his fellow citizens and against populations abroad are hidden. And still, Barack Obama is remembered not as an architect of continuous war, but as its antithesis. Remember, he got a Nobel Peace Prize. Not as one of the key architects of contemporary domestic mechanisms of fascism, but again, as its antithesis. This is what charisma does. It doesn't erase the record, but instead it reorganizes how we're allowed to feel about the person in question. It's sort of permission structure that allows the history of violence to exist without fundamentally altering how the person who authorized it is seen. I almost see it like as separating the artist from the work, from the person in a way. But in this case, the art is drone bombing and murdering civilians. Two things are held to be true at once, without the acknowledgement that the two things are in direct moral and material contradiction to one another. And this idea also offers empathy and humanity to someone who can accurately be branded as a mass killer. And if that is the moral position that we're willing to take, are we willing to take this for other mass killers? We have been. Look at George W. Bush. There can't be exceptions to positions that ultimately propose a moral conclusion or character, even if through the prism of nostalgia in the response to times of crisis. Totally agree, yes. But that's when these strong men, these charismatic people emerge. So now we get to New York's finest mayor, the man of the people, the man who rides the subways. Oh my God, look, he goes door to door. He asks people what they think. For transparency, Sana'a has been a vocal critic of Mayor Zoran Mamdani's acquiescence to Zionists, as well as his choice to run within the structure of the same Democratic Party that oversaw the Israeli genocide of Palestinians. Amen, sister. I am 100% with you on both of those things. But he's also been a member of the Democratic Party since before 2024. He was a member of New York City politics since before 2024. He was a member of the machine, and he was going to play ball, and they knew that he was going to play ball to a certain point. And the fact that he then became mayor of one of the most Zionist cities in the country meant that he had to represent them as their mayor going forward, which boxed him into a certain point. Okay, continuing. His ascent, as Sana'a had previously mentioned, parallels the mythology of Barack Obama's rise in some of the most critical ways. An arguably underexperienced, but undeniably likable young guy who emerges in the political moment of great repression and economic fatigue with a campaign bolstered by grassroots mobilization, also partly funded and backed by members of the Obama campaign, like Axelrod's PR person, but we'll get to that later. Okay, to promise a new day in the lives of Americans, to promise that a better way is not only possible, but coming. And both also ascend into not only positions of power, but also come to serve in the charismatic resuscitation of a Democratic Party weakened by its own hubris and complicity and complacency in imperial crimes and a general disinterest in serving the needs and moral wants of the citizens. So why the fuck would you want to align with them? Mamdani comes from a radical tradition, both theoretically and politically. Here's a fantastic profile by journalist Azad Essa. But everyone understands that not only does becoming a leader of a group diverse communities require a level of pragmatism, but that to enter the machinery of American electoral politics is to moderate oneself. The party doesn't bend you, you bend to the party. This sounds awfully familiar. It's been less than a year since Mayor Mamdani took office, and during that time, he's achieved some of his promises and reneged on others. Given how most elected officials govern, it's not a bad tenure thus far, and most New Yorkers agree. I'm guessing she links to a poll from Marist. Yep. I would, yeah, okay. He's also here. Mamdani's repeated capitulations to Zionists, and I knew she'd get to this, and the slow burn betrayal of the Palestinian movement that helped bring him to power offer a more recent case study in how charisma blunts accountability, especially as he's positioned to run interference for a political party actively burying the impact of its role in the Gaza genocide on its 2024 electoral failure because they don't want to release the report that says that most people didn't want to vote for Harris because of Gaza and not because she was a blithering, idiot, drunken stepmom, which is sad, but I'll take however it was because she would have been just as bad, if not worse, than this clown. I really, truly believe that. Even a profile in the New York Times by Asted W. Herndon, days ahead of his election, he was characterized as Mamdani 2.0. And an event, not an anti-Zionist. Literally, they literally called him not an anti-Zionist, a characterization that his campaign never chose to correct if needed. So literally, this is quoted from the article. He says he supports Palestinian rights, but he's not an anti-Zionist. He made key concessions when it comes to policing. Importantly, what he made clear was he was open to compromise, and when it came to his proposed millionaires tax, so we're calling him Mamdani 2.0. They just decided to make that up so they could figure out a way to tolerate the fact that he was actually going to be their mayor. But on Palestine, the very issue that anchored his rise, his moderation has been palpable, and it has not been incidental, but structural. Not an aberration, but a pattern baked into the position and world he's assumed. And while many of his critics and non-sycophantic supporters can point to many instances of an increasingly moderate Mayor Mamdani who betrays candidate and organizer Mamdani, there are three moments in particular that stand out. And she's going to go there. Let's name names. Let's go there. All right. Number one was that in November of 2024, days after winning the election, when he had all the political capital in the world, he announced that he would retain avowed anti-Palestinian Jessica Tisch as NYPD commissioner. This move, perhaps his most egregious thus far, ignored calls from his base to remove her over her role, given her very long history in consolidating NYPD power, in shielding misconduct and expanding surveillance that's targeted Black, Brown, and Muslim communities, leading the repression of anti-genocide protesters, all while helping entrench counter-terrorism tactics and philosophy in policing, which have been paired with trainings in Israel that Tisch herself has done. But she hasn't just done that. She's actually the Israeli liaison to the NYPD, but she also was the negotiator that was negotiating with the people at Hins Hall, and she was fighting and organizing to get rid of the protesters at Columbia University also. This woman's a nightmare. There's no way he should have kept her. And then she again quotes from the Polis Project. All right, Mamdani faced sharp backlash from grassroots organizations, public defenders, and police accountability advocates for this decision, with critics framing it as a betrayal of his campaign pledges to demilitarize policing, abolish the criminal group database, which they often call the gang database, and counter-terrorist strategic response group units, and prioritize community safety over surveillance and repression, which he's done none of. And then there's this whole big infographic over how bad Jessica Tisch is. Right? So, in his reappointment, Mamdani offered glowing praises of Tisch, claiming that he admired her work cracking down on corruption in the upper echelons of the police department, driving down crime, and standing up for New Yorkers in the face of authoritarianism. Disgusting. Tisch, just months prior, had stood on stage at an ADL event, condemning anti-genocide protesters and accused them of targeting not Israel, but the Jewish people themselves, which we know isn't true because I'm one of them and I'm Jewish, so fuck you. Then there was Mamdani's support for Hakeem Jeffries. In late November 2025, during an appearance on Meet the Press, Mamdani was asked, if Democrats win the midterms, do you want to see Hakeem Jeffries become the Speaker of the House? Without hesitation, the mayor-elect said yes to a man who not only waited until the very last moment, okay, to endorse Mamdani himself, but also has been coined as AIPAC Shakur by Charlemagne, no less, for being one of the Democratic Party's most unwavering supporters of Israel, who continues to be one of the biggest recipients of AIPAC money as well as pro-Israel lobby money, generally. A vocal and ardent opponent of socialism as well, Hakeem Jeffries had also, just a couple days prior, voted to pass a resolution condemning the horrors of socialism ahead of a proposed meeting between the mayor-elect and President Trump. You remember that very famous meeting in the White House where Trump basically played Mamdani from the home field advantage, and the Democrats all thought that he won that exchange, but not really. Getting him there in the first place was the win. Summoning him to the White House. Okay, prior to the vote, Mamdani also made clear that he wouldn't support New York City Councilman Chiose, a left-wing challenger who sought to primary Jeffries, claiming now's not the time. So we got to keep our powder dry. We're going to get pay-go. Does that sound familiar? There's Hakeem Jeffries and just how much money he's taken from all the Israel lobby. Almost $1.5 million. Finally, there's Mamdani's recent photo op with Obama as part of a promotional campaign for his universal childcare program, which serves as perhaps the most punctuating image of how insurgent politics reabsorbed into power, restoring the same structures of violence as palatable and loosening any demand for accountability. And what makes it so especially striking, so punctuating, is again that Mamdani once called Obama evil, stating in a tweet that, hasn't Obama shown us that the lesser of two evils is still pretty damn evil? You sat next to evil and smiled like big for the cameras, Zoran. What happened? It's difficult to look at the footage of the two men together and not see it as a moment where the torch is passed. Now, the connection between them, I mean, there are many, but to me, the biggest connection is David Axelrod, who ended up sending his PR people to frame Mamdani in the corporate press the way that they framed Obama in his run-up to his presidency. But we're not done. It's not just that the ruling class allows glimmers of critique or dissent. It's that these glimmers then serve a very real function, which is to tame and redirect people's political energies into the orbit of the two-party system. Okay, that's Dr. Nazia Kazi in Middle East Eye last year. So here's where we get to the civility of empire, how this charm and how this charisma ends up leading to them actually capturing people's attention and them willing to write off and ignore murder. There are undoubtedly many who may not like these moves by Mamdani, but would argue that for better or for worse, they reflect the politics of pragmatism. That sounds like shitlib talk. That as mayor for all New Yorkers, his goal is to achieve what he can for residents who've long dealt with leadership that ignored their needs and changing daily realities and burdens. That's true, but he's not any different. And for many, Mamdani's overall pro-Palestine positionality is seen as revolutionary within an American political landscape that continues to deny Palestinians basic humanity and rights beyond approved talking points. Also not wrong, but still, that's a half measure. But nothing exists in and of itself. Mamdani simply does not simply exist as a mayor or as his own charismatic, good-looking self. He exists as the leading representative of the most popular and powerful form of insurgent politics in the United States. One that stands not only against the architecture of economic servitude designed by the rich and powerful, but against the architecture of violence that allows the American empire to govern, that has exterminated entire bloodlines and decimated life-sustaining infrastructure in an open-air prison. and been proud about it. It's a political movement that has grown out of Occupy, out of BLM, out of Bernie 2016 and 2020. Now she's speaking directly to me and a lot of people here. A movement born of years of anti-Israel occupation organizing, built on the legacy of Iraq and Afghanistan, the forever wars. Thank you, Julian Assange, for the Afghanistan war logs and the Iraq war logs and collateral murder and publishing that, and Chelsea Manning. Mamdani stands not on the shoulders, but shoulder to shoulder with movements and politics that emerged in response to the devastating domestic and global changes designed by the violence of the War on Terror. He isn't a tag along with these movements. He too emerged from that world, those politics and those movements. But he was also elite and he went to elite schools and he wasn't exactly within that world, but okay. Today, by choosing to operate within a political party that oversaw, supported, denied, and continues to obfuscate the crime of genocide in Gaza, Mamdani stands in direct opposition to the movements he once claimed. Sellout would be the word I would use, yes. What grounds that opposition, what renders it a betrayal, is his continued and unnecessary acquiescence to the party's need to be resuscitated among a base that's increasingly unwilling to engage any elected official who refuses to commit to, at minimum, a total arms embargo on Israel and an end to funding the apartheid state. Why do you still acquiesce to these people? Why do you still want them to be the leaders of your party if you regain the House? He has no answer for any of that, other than to say, I'm a Democrat and I'm a good soldier. That's not what you were sent there to be. And you're still not sent to Washington, so you can comment however you want for here. Fuck that guy. The wave is turning toward the very politics that brought Mamdani to power, even as the Democratic Party works to resurrect it, because they can fuck up a cup of coffee. And in that tension, Mamdani increasingly finds himself not as its representative, but as its mediator, as the translator. He has become sort of a piper, similar to Obama, who not only funnels the disenchanted back into the Democratic Party, but also offers electoralism as the best and necessary route of accountability for genocide heirs for fighting against the influence of pro-Israel lobbies and influence. Okay, because you're going to fight against their multi-billions of dollars that they're contributing to all of these political campaigns across the entire country with electoralism by beating them in campaigns where 90% of the people with the most funding wins every time? Okay, that's a strategy. That's a move. It also begs the question, if the purpose of Mamdani's running was to push back significantly and materially against and within the party of genocide, then why acquiesce to it and its most powerful actors like Jeffries? What's the point of insurgency if it immediately moderates itself, if it allows itself to be used, offering only unthreatening moments of dissent and photo ops in order to get his universal fucking childcare thing, his pre-K thing passed? It is in this effort that we find the manufacturing of the civility of empire. The United States, not as it is, but as it prefers to be seen. This is the Hollywood effect. An empire made tolerable not through the absence of violence, but through the presence of figures who make that easier to set aside, and whose supporters urge patience or dismiss all critics as addicted to loss and misery, rather than as observers of history and students of political patterns who understand exactly where these capitulations lead. There. The production of these figures, including the very poor attempted manufacturing of them and the elevation of their charisma, is part of how empire sustains itself without appearing to do so. It doesn't rely solely on coercion or force, but on the constant renewal of belief that change is still possible within the very systems that have consistently foreclosed it. Belief that proximity to power is the same as transforming it. Hey, we got Pago, right? Belief that the right person can make an inherently violent structure humane. Come on, guys, it's Lucy with the football. This time, it's going to be different. I swear. Just get on board. One more vote blue. I swear this sounds like a Jesse Jet song. This is how accountability is deferred again and again. And so what remains is not just the endurance of empire, but its ability to reproduce itself through charismatic, out-of-the-box, quote-unquote, figures who feel like a break from it, even as they're tasked with carrying it forward. Okay, and this got a bunch of likes, including, oh, look at that, our friend Zay Squirrel. Check that out. All right. Views my own Sana Saeed. SanaSaeed. SanaSaeed.substack.com. Follow her, support her over there. Give her a paid subscription if you can. I'm going to likely give her a paid upgrade soon. But I did want to talk a little bit more about this. And I had some thoughts. And I had some thoughts throughout it, but I've got a couple more. First of all, I find it conspicuous and interesting that she talks about a lot of this rise and only mentions it in the context of Obama and Mamdani, and does not mention another New York politician that a lot of us were snowed by in the past decade. And that we feel like, Mamdani in some ways is Obama 2.0, but I kind of feel like he's more AOC 2.0. And after reading this, I said, this is why I say none of the above. And I've been saying none of the above for years now, and I'll continue to say none of the above. The Democrats, they embrace Mamdani as someone who could be controlled and manipulated via the media and his own constituents. Someone who was already part of that New York City Democratic Party machine for 5 years before he ran for mayor. The Democrats knew exactly what they were getting with him. Once they realized that they couldn't smear him out of the race, which they definitely tried to do first, they put their arm over his shoulder and decided to ride his popularity with the people, who weren't paying close enough attention to see that he's AOC 2.0. What it attempts to do is align the pro-Palestine movement with Democrats in the minds of people they're trying to get to vote against Trump and Republicans. The Democrats aren't even really trying to earn anyone's vote, it feels like. They're trying to not seem horrific enough that people would rather the pendulum swing back to them being in control. All right, and that was a quote stack from this article. Because I also did an interesting search. I did a DuckDuckGo, and I took the title of this article and I did a search in DuckDuckGo. Now, Google, by the way, will block a lot of Substack art publications that DuckDuckGo will not. I believe that's the last I checked. But notice that her article comes up first. But I find it really interesting what else comes up when I type literally. It was the title of this article copy-pasted. It's a Politico article from August 15th. So basically what I'm trying to show here is that at least the progressive media and the corporate media as well, and others, have been trying to make this tie, this link, for quite a while. Yes, it really was a long opinion piece. I know. I agree. All right. And we're going to get to your thing too tonight, I promise. All right. But I just found this. Here's the USA Today. All right. After he wins, is he New York's Obama? So they're already making these connections May 21st. It's almost a year ago, where Mamdani trashed Obama. This was the one early on that had the receipts. Here we go. 2 movements, 2 mandates. This is another article about them. So what you see is from May right through, the election, a lot of people were trying to make this connection. And then all of a sudden, that connection kind of died off. People stopped talking about that for some reason. And then they had this photo shoot together. So I just thought that was all very interesting. Again, her omission of AOC from the article I also found really interesting. I wouldn't say suspicious. I like Sanaa. Used to follow her on AJ Plus, love her work. Yeah, she's really good. And I follow her on Instagram as well. She's very good on Instagram. So you can follow her over there. What else have we got here? Okay, Cowboy Kitty. Natalia's still in limbo, awaiting the appeal. They're torturing her and trying to get her to self-deport, which is what you had told us earlier in the month. Where I'm so sorry, man. It's just fucking awful. Anyway, many think Reef is charismatic. That's funny. Well, he is charismatic. Sure he is. But you can watch him tomorrow night on INN News with Colin. He's going to be doing a whole other show with covering stuff. Angel, welcome to the show. I know you've been insanely busy. Angel's been leveling up, man, taking classes and learning how to program. And yeah, if I was American, I'd be pissed about what my tax dollars fund. They certainly do. I certainly am. And I think a lot of Americans certainly are. Okay. Good point on Obama. I hated what happened, to Gaddafi, valuing this viewpoint. I appreciate that. Thank you. Again, this is Sanaa Saeed's viewpoint, and I agree with her, and I'm bringing this because I think a lot of people don't really talk about it. All right. Obama gave Biden free reign over the Ukraine coup. True. Absolutely. That set up the stage. Victoria Nuland, the Maidan coup, and that set the stage for Trump then to ignore it, but then for Biden to take it over when he came back. Also the reason that whistleblowers have no legal protections and get assassinated with impunity and no investigation. Amen. That's right, sister. Seven Sword Mary, who then switched over to Rumble, because we're live on both Substack and Rumble. Okay. Randy Terpstra, in a video game, Riot and Revolution, make until we got a dictatorship of the proletariat, comrades. Amen to that. All right. Now is not the time. How often have we heard that? Yes. Good evening, our friend Golden Monarch. I'm just going through the chats because I want to. Karen Peterson, how are you? Welcome to the show. Yep. Christy Gnome's runaway face. Oh, goodness gracious. I think we know who that is. Okay. All right. Well, no, don't be watching. Yes, I know. Wednesday nights, you're at your own show. A little plug. Dissenting Bloom is on Prol Pilled, which goes head to head with INN News, and we won't talk about that tonight, but that's another story for another day. Ghost Art is still here hanging out. That's great. You're covering Opus Dei or Opus DEI. Does that mean that the Trump administration's got to rule it out because it has DEI in the title? I think that's the truth. Jesse, by the way, yes, Christy will be on Thursday. We're going to do a stream. I made the thumbnail. It is my wife. And it's literally him in like a Borat on Borat's head, and you'll see. It's a tribute, and he'll do it's romantic love songs this time. And last time he did that, it was a huge hit. So we're gonna have a good time Thursday night. I'm really looking forward to that. American Tradition Thursday night at 10 p.m. Eastern and 7 Pacific. So now that we finished that long article, I want to get to some fuck Israel stuff. And we're going to get to kind of around the world of how Israel is fucking with all the things. We'll start with Asal Rod, Professor Asal Rod, who, by the way, just published or is about to publish a book. So you can go to her Twitter or Substack and get a link to pre-order that. Trump, I didn't go to war for Israel. U.S. State Department, we went to war for Israel. Here's the State Department saying on March 10th, the U.S. is engaged in its conflict at the request of and in the collective self-defense of its Israeli ally. That's pretty fucking clear. Clown show. clown show. So we've got two different articles about this. One from The Dissident. Government press release admits that the U.S. attacked Iran at the request of Israel. Pretty obvious and head on the nose. Okay. And then the other one, which I found a little bit more interesting, left with nothing but gimmicks, Trump gets his bluff called again by a confident Iran. And we're going to get to that one. But there are a couple of points that were not in that tweet that I did want to mention. So the New York Times has previously reported that lobbying efforts from Netanyahu and Mossad were the final nail in the coffin that made Trump make the decision to go to war. Right? So then he tells us what the New York Times reports. Okay, then in the presentation, this is what I wanted to talk about. The presentation was reportedly called farcical by CIA Director John Ratfuck, bullshit by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, reportedly said, "Sir, this is, in my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis. They oversell, and their plans are not always well developed. They know they need us, and that's why they're hard selling." So just within the inner cabinet, you've got contradiction, and the ones that are really bought by Israel, Rubio and Ratfuck, are in complete denial. Despite this, Trump listened to Netanyahu's bullshit and farcical presentation and made the decision to launch war with Iran. Or are they saying that, okay, the presentation was, okay, so these guys also even, you couldn't even convince these guys who are paid by Israel effectively and on Israel's side that this was real. Now the Trump admin has admitted that this war was launched at the request and behest of Israel. Okay. So Iran called his bluff, right? As talks collapsed, Trump again issued a series of major threats about wiping out all Iranian power plants. Right? Remember that? No more Mr. Nice Guy. It's time for the Iran killing machine to end. Yeah. Hot kettle. In response, Iranian leaders laughed in the blowhard's face. Parliamentary Speaker Mohammad Ghalibaf's advisor wrote that the losing side cannot dictate the terms. Continuing the siege is no different from bombing and must be responded to militarily. Meanwhile, Trump's extension of the ceasefire definitely means buying time for a surprise strike. It's time for Iran to take the initiative. The disorganized dance this time was an even bigger fiasco than usual. Trump had claimed his negotiators were traveling to Islamabad for talks with Iran, while Iran denied even going there. Then news broke that Rubio and co. in fact stayed home, and Iran was right. It had never agreed to talks because its demands have not yet been met, primarily lifting the blockade and stopping bombing Lebanon. Trump then expectorated an even more unhinged series of ravings which made little sense. After threatening to blow up the country and kill all Iran's leaders, literally, Trump suddenly extended the ceasefire indefinitely, despite Iran stating they didn't even request such an extension and are ready for full resumption of hostilities. Okay. Pretty interesting. Right? And it, again, therefore extend until such time as their proposal is submitted. What a gag. Talk about having no cards. He followed up with this brain-busting entry. Most people at this point no longer even have the patience nor interest to decipher such jejune gimmickry, right? That first you had, they don't want the strait closed. They want it open so they can make $500 million a day, which is therefore what they're losing if it's closed. Iran is collapsing financially. They want the strait opened immediately. They're starving for... Dude, talking out of both sides of his mouth. Losing $500 million a day. He seems to be inanely implying that Iran only claims the strait is closed because the U.S. blockaded it. But in fact, the order of events is in reverse. Iran had closed the strait first, which forced Donnie Gimmicks to pretend to blockade it to save face, given that the spent and ineffective U.S. military no longer had any cards left to play particularly after its broken down carrier groups had shamefully fled the theater. Now they hover outside the Gulf of Oman, seizing Iranian ships as far away as India in a cringe-inducing show of force? How is that a show of force? The blockade line is there. This is where they captured a ship. Show of force. This clown. In fact, CNN confirms the humiliating truth that we all knew all along. Trump was essentially begging the Iranians for negotiations and received radio silence from them. What a shock. This is what spurred him to extend the ceasefire out of desperation and a lack of options. All right, this is a whole other article that came out of CNN. It's quite simple. Trump's bluff was called by the Iranians. He threatened to destroy their country. They replied, "Come try." And that's all she wrote. Of course, many still believe that the U.S. is still gearing up for a major escalation, but Trump knows he has little leverage, and more aimless bombing of an increasingly entrenched IRGC structure isn't going to accomplish anything. Hitting power plants will only invite a likewise response onto a Gulf region facing crippling economic damage. News continues to pour out that UAE in particular has been hard hit, with its economy allegedly nearing the brink, which is why it's now begging the U.S. for a lifeline. But so as not to be accused of one-sidedness by Trump loyalists, let us briefly explore the counter-hypothesis suggested by some that Trump's plan is in fact genius and Iran is the one losing out by his blockade, summarized here. This is some mental gymnastics. Iran snubbed the second negotiation and went back to Tehran to start displaying missiles. They thought Trump would cancel the ceasefire and start fighting them. But no, Trump's new strategy is working excellently. He just extended the ceasefire by himself without removing the blockade and return the clause to Iran. If they submit a new proposal, the blockade might be removed. No ships are still going to enter or leave Iranian ports. Trading between China and Iran remains in Trump's hands, and the regime continues to lose $500 million every day. Trump seems to have cornered Iran. This is the mental gymnastics that MAGA is telling themselves. Maybe the above would be true if the blockade was that effective, but many sources have claimed that dozens of Iranian ships have long passed the blockade. Here from the Financial Times, at least 34 tankers. This article stated that the U.S. nabbed one ship near the Gulf of Oman, the other in the Indo-Pacific area, as shown earlier, but 19 others have successfully broken the blockade by exiting the Gulf, with 15 others entering the Gulf, going the opposite way towards Iran, transiting the Arabian Sea. Sure, blockade, where they don't actually stop ships. Again, we go back to the idea that it's never black or white, with one side totally dominating while suffering no losses. Sure, Iran could take major economic losses soon once the Karg Island oil shipments fill up and they're theoretically unable to leave. All right, though the fact that many ships are successfully breaking the blockade appears to nullify this possibility if they can get through. But as implied before, the U.S. can't simply sit at the Strait's gates with no economic blowback of its own. So here he is to play the devil's advocate. He looks at Zero Hedge, which is a right-wing kind of extreme. They sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. Here's the 15 days until its oil industry begins full shut-ins. Not only are major strains growing between the U.S. and its Gulf allies, most notably now UAE, but oil prices may continue to rise, with many experts predicting global economic shocks that will filter down to the U.S. and even more of its allies, especially the ones in Europe. On top of which, each day, the U.S. squats on its strait while doing effectively nothing leads to major political and credibility loss for Trump, who's being eaten alive by the press and whose constituents are growing increasingly tired of his aimless political charades and impotent military adventures. All on behalf of Israel, while our prices are going up and we're getting no fucking relief at home whatsoever. There's an argument to be made that Iran can in fact outlast such a blockade, while it is the U.S. that will take the more lasting damage overall. That's not even to mention the monetary costs of imposing the blockade with the current naval forces active in the region. That leads us to the final topic. CNN's latest piece releases shocking new figures of the U.S.'s munitions expenditures during the Iran conflict. We're running out of missiles. So, but at the same time, look at who it came from. I don't believe a word Natasha Bertrand says. So that allows me to kind of dismiss a portion of this and skip through to, but this is showing, okay, what CSIS, again, intelligence community slop being put out by the State Department and its proxies and its think tanks, is saying that this is how much we've depleted in 90 days, and not even 90 days, in 60 days. Actually, I think Thursday, or the 28th, today was the 60-day mark of when they needed to explain to Congress why we were there and get authorization. As you can see, in only a couple short weeks, the U.S. fired thousands of its rarest and most valuable munitions, which are only produced at a trickle of a few dozen per year each. This is why, as we had just written about in the last piece, the Pentagon is apparently in talks with major U.S. automakers like Ford, GM, Oshkosh, etc., about converting their production lines into munitions production. We're running out of ammo. Let's take a look at that again. At $2.6 million apiece, we had 3,100. We've already expended 850 plus, and it takes 40 months, 47 months to get new ones. That's a lot. We've already used half our Patriot missiles, at least. 42 months for new ones there. THAADs, all right, used almost half of them there, up to as many as between 290 out of 360 at a cost of $15.5 million apiece. All right, during the hot phase of the recent conflict, a shot-down U.S. JASSM cruise missile was found in Iran, which had the manufacturing date of May 2025 written on it, which led many weapons experts and commentators to conclude that the U.S. had already depleted old stock and was down to its most recently produced batches. We're already out of weapons. Yeah, that's what the $1.5 trillion military budget's for. So the U.S. military contractors can get lots and lots of new money with smart weapons. Get rid of all the ones we have. Well, we need to have a funded military, right? We need to have an armed military, right? So he's just literally just letting it all go so they can rearm and funding it to the tune of $1.5 trillion. Okay, so but what can we conclude from that is that it can't possibly be Iran that folds first, because at a production rate of only a few dozen per year, we simply can't afford to prolong the conflict much longer, lest it run its magazines completely dry and becomes exposed for all time. I still think that Trump doesn't care, because he's got a fucking fleet of Anduril drones on the way. This is why we can only assume that Trump's gas bag lecturing is nothing more than inert bluffery meant to frighten an increasingly unvexed Iran into making concessions. Latest footage from Tehran showed massive crowds taking to the streets in celebration of the ceasefire's expiration. Not showing that. At the same time, the IRGC released new video of their underground missile and drone production sites, claiming that, as Simplicius suggested in the previous report, that they're producing and updating their munitions even faster now during the ceasefire than they had pre-war. right? So this is a video that was put out by the IRGC of their facilities deep underground. Okay, so that was a long one, I know, and that's talking about Iran. But I also wanted to point out, and this is a really important one, is the murder of another journalist, but not in Gaza. This one is Amal Khalil. Okay, this is by Indie Media Award honoree Monda Weiss. Okay, and this also was picked up in IndieNewsNow.com. So if you had refreshed the page and scrolled down at some point, you would have seen this square, and we have it also tweet out with a link directly to the article. All right. Amal Khalil was a brave Lebanese reporter who for the past 2 decades has reported from the often dangerous southern part of her country for the Al Akhbar daily newspaper. On April 22nd, while doing her job, she died in agony, and there is compelling evidence that the Israeli military murdered her. She was 43 years old. This sounds like another journalist that was murdered several years ago. Before October 7th, by the way. It was actually one of the incidents that radicalized me personally was when they shot her in the face. But once again, the mainstream U.S. media is guilty of sickening malpractice because they're not journalists. Journalists are supposed to make special efforts to follow the story when their colleagues are killed in action. But the leading American cable news networks so far, okay, have mostly not reported on her death at all. On MS Now, the most progressive outlet, owned and funded by Comcast, nothing on there. Ditto for CNN, although network's CNN International subdivision did air a 2-minute and 16-second report, which most American subscribers will have missed. Remember that CNN International is in the middle of being sold from Viacom to Larry Ellison and David Ellison Skydance, so they're about to be Zionist controlled. Neither did the major legacy TV networks cover the story. Nothing on ABC, controlled by Zionist Disney, NBC, controlled by Zionist Comcast, or CBS, controlled by Zionist Skydance. I wonder why. There was one honorable exception, though. On the PBS NewsHour, because that's publicly funded, Jeff Bennett raised the killing of Amal Khalil in an interview with Israel's ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, and pressed Danon hard on it. But here's what actually happened. Back in 2024, Amal Khalil had already received death threats from an Israeli media commentator with close ties to the military who warned her to leave southern Lebanon. On April 22nd of this year, she was reporting near the village of Al-Tiri when an Israeli airstrike hit the vehicle in front of her. As usual, she'd been wearing protective equipment that clearly identified her as a journalist. She and a fellow reporter took refuge in a nearby home. That reporter, Zainab Faraj, told the Associated Press, quote, Amal was crawling, she was wounded, her nose and head and shoulder and leg. Both women were able to speak by phone to family and other colleagues. Then as a second Israeli airstrike, double tap, hit their refuge. Rescue workers got to her colleague, but the Union of Journalists in Lebanon charges that Israeli forces used stun grenades to prevent further efforts to free Amal. She continued to lay in that rubble for hours, surely in pain. 6 hours later, the rescuers finally got through, but she had already died. Back to the mainstream U.S. media. Unlike television news, newspapers didn't entirely ignore the killing of Amal Khalil, but their coverage was mostly minimal, with so far little or no follow-up. Because why would there be from them? One New York Times report especially stood out for its grotesque contortions to try and hide the compelling evidence that the Israeli military had prevented her rescuers from saving her. Because they did. But we know that the New York Times whitewashes Zionism and murder all the time by Israel. The sub-headline to Max Barak's April 23rd report telegraphed the paper's concealment strategy. Quote, mourners paid respects to Amal Khalil, who remained trapped under the rubble for hours before emergency medics recovered her body. Unquote. You had to read all the way down to the 7th paragraph to learn who had actually trapped her and was stopping those emergency medics. And astonishingly, here was the explanatory sentence, quote, the Israeli military denied in a statement that it had prevented rescuers from reaching the injured journalists and said the incident was under investigation. Because, of course, we investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing. This is quite extraordinary. No, it's not. The New York Times is reporting Israel's denial before it even bothers to tell you what the charge is. Because we know that the New York Times is captured by Zionists and run by Zionists and Zionist apologists. So let's quickly contrast, though. Times with an article the exact same day in The Guardian, Britain's flagship legacy newspaper. Here's the headline to Peter Beaumont's report, quote, Israeli killing of Lebanese journalist draws international condemnation, unquote, and the subhead, Lebanese Prime Minister calls attack that killed Amal Khalil a war crime, with rescuers attempting to free her also targeted. Tells the story in 2 sentences. Nobody could seem to do that here. In fairness, not all U.S. papers tried to downplay Israel's complicity. LA Times reporter Nabi Boulos was actually on the scene in southern Lebanon at her funeral, and he did a fair and honest report. He quoted Mohammed Zanati, a journalist friend of Khalil's, who said, quote, this was an assassination. This wasn't by mistake. The Israeli military knew who she was, and they killed her. We know they've killed more than 250 or 300 journalists since October 7th because they don't want anyone reporting on their war crimes from within. Meanwhile, the New York Times opinion writer Nicholas Kristof posted on Twitter about Amal Khalil, quote, journalists worldwide should stand up for colleagues who are murdered, unquote. Kristof is right, of course, but it was revealing that he didn't link to the reports in his own newspaper about Amal Khalil. Instead, he cited an article from the propagandist Associated Press. Sad. Very sad. And there's other stuff from Mondo Weiss. Go support Mondo Weiss. Again, Indie Media Award honoree. Love those guys. They're doing a fund drive. They need money. They need your support. This was James North out of Mondo Weiss. Like his stuff. The third article in our Fuck Israel segment and final one is out of Unicorn Riot, and it actually comes directly out of Gaza. And that's why I saved it for the end. Because we went from Iran to Lebanon to Gaza. Most of the places where Israel is wreaking the most havoc right now. Doctors Without Borders continue humanitarian work in Gaza despite being banned by Israel. So this is a report about a Doctors Without Borders crew that stayed there in defiance of what Israel is telling them to do. I mean, wow. So Nikos Georgiadis, who I actually have a Indie Media Award honoree, he's actually got like a Zago Brothers illustration of him. He's one of the lead reporters there. Okay, from Gaza City, Israel has banned Doctors Without Borders since January from providing health care and humanitarian aid to Palestinians in the war-torn Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank. Despite this ban, MSF says it remains committed to providing services in Palestine, and as of April 13th, they've even resumed core medical activities at Nasser Hospital. They are one of 37 humanitarian organizations that Israel has banned from working in the Palestinian territories. Since, again, the 1st of January this year, Israel has blocked all aid and new international staff from getting to MSF in Gaza, And as of March 1st, Israel forced all MSF international workers out of Gaza. Well, we know why. Because they don't want them to be healed. Unicorn Riot visited the headquarters of Gaza's Doctors Without Borders in late January and heard from MSF's coordinator in Gaza and the mother of a young girl who said that they saved her daughter's foot from after an airstrike. And you can see this video below, which is almost 5 minutes long. I'm not going to play it. Dire is a word that Hunter McGovern, that's Reporters Without Borders in France's project coordinator in Gaza, chose to describe the medical and healthcare situation in the Gaza Strip. And that is, to put it lightly. McGovern spoke to Unicorn Riot about the importance of the medical services that they provide and how they were already dealing with supply shortages from Israel's total blockade. Remember, the ceasefire was over, right? And they had lifted that and allowed trucks to come in, right? He was later expelled from the Strip along with other international workers on March 1st. Reporters Without Borders still says the org is still fully registered to work in Palestine under their registration with the Palestinian Authority. However, Israel, who is illegally occupying Palestinian lands, let's never forget and never stop talking about the fact that they are illegally occupying Palestine, announced the ban as a national security measure on December 30th. Then they went on to deregister these 37 NGOs from operating in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. We covered that in early January. Rocio Simon Martinez, who's the nursing manager for Reporters Without Borders, said that NGOs leaving Gaza will have catastrophic consequences for people who depend almost entirely on humanitarian assistance. Because they kidnapped or murdered all the doctors and the nurses. The needs are enormous. Again, that was the intent. Okay? While at MSF's location in Gaza City, Firas Jundia told Unicorn Riot that because of MSF's excellent service, her daughter's foot is recovering. Okay? Before we went to Doctors Without Borders, doctors at Al-Shifa Hospital told us her foot would have to be amputated. But after transferring her to Doctors Without Borders, they treated her. Because they're so limited at Shifa, their answer is amputate to save the leg. Her daughter, Juri, is 8. She then had her foot run over by a truck. She had her foot initially run over by a truck while she was running away from an airstrike. She was taken to Al-Shifa Hospital, which was, of course, ill-equipped to treat her daughter, and had told her that she may need amputation. And there's the foot that was saved. Al-Shifa Hospital, the largest in Gaza, has repeatedly been bombed by Israel and was the site of mass killings and atrocities carried out by Israeli forces. Dr. Al-Adwan, I think, was also from there. CR special from last March when families attempted to retrieve the bodies of dozens of Palestinians killed outside Al-Shifa. Okay. Beyond her daughter's care, it will be catastrophic for the whole population if Reporters Without Borders closes because of the many injuries we're seeing and the excellent treatment that they provide. And there's a lot more coverage from Unicorn Riot because they've had people on the ground in Palestine and actual footage. And bless them for doing that. Again, Indie Media Award honoree. Big fan of Unicorn Riot and their independent journalism. I've been following them since Standing Rock. They were there the day of the Capitol riots, streaming stuff. They're good outlet. Okay. So fuck Israel for all of those things. And yes. Oh yeah, it was very sad. Do we know total number that they've assassinated? I don't know what the total number is, but it's high, Seven Sword. And illegally occupying Syria and Lebanon while accusing Iran of being the nation trying to occupy all of West Asia and complete the Greater Israel Project. Totally agree. Talking Wombat said for Amal, agree. Getting back to the thing about
nationalizing the automakers. Ford will be great at manufacturing munitions. Remember those exploding Pintos? Funny. All right. Catching up on the real Curtis Yarvin, An Orbit of Tyranny per Peter Thiel. She's read through the beginning parts of Ava Kaufman's Yarvin's Plot Against America. Okay, that's good. Right. The U.S. war with Iran is to make money for the oil barons who are selling barrels at astronomical prices right now. That's part of it, yes. It's also to control the oil supply worldwide, not just to profit from it, but I totally agree there. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I just brought a bunch of independent journalists and not one corporate thing, though they did quote corporate media. The ways to do that are up there. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. Go-free.com/Indie News Network. Then we got paypal.me/Indie News Network and monthly at patreon.com/Indie News Network. You can tip the network directly at our website, at our news site, IndieNewsNow.com, where you can find these articles I just read and the one I'm about to read right now, next by Dissent in Bloom. At least a link to them, all at IndieNewsNow.com. And then we've got our Substacks. And hello to everybody watching on Substack. I see Talking Wombats over there, Donna Everett, Miles Stotts, Ken Harvey, just shouting out a few people I see in the chat. And INN Newsletter is the other Substack that I publish. That's part of Indie News Network. You see the INN logo up in the corner. I'm a founding member of INN, where we publish stuff every day. Every Friday, there's 25 to 35 things that you could catch up with reading, listening, or watching. And that's articles from The Dissident and live streams from AM Wake Up 5 days a week in the Independent Review. And this show, American Tradition, INN News, Pro Wrestling Talk, INN One-on-Ones, of course, Angel in the Afternoon with Angel Rivera. All of them can be found at INNnewsletter.com every Friday. Links to everything from that week. So, Karen Peterson, how are you? Good to see you. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight. Wyatt Reed is in Iran now. I did hear that. I did see that he had recorded a video from there. Your guesstimate is no less than 500 medical personnel. That also would count Red Crescent workers, and I would totally agree with that. I would also count UNRWA workers and World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres. Israel's murdered all of them with no repercussions. Tell me any other country that could get away with murdering that many different organizations, aid workers, intentionally double tapping. And then we haven't even talked about Hin Rajab. 355 bullets. Come on. So upsetting, really. Okay. So we're going to get to constructing J.D. Vance. And I'm going to go to the brilliant Dissent in Bloom, who did a tremendous amount of research. Holy crap. The amount of work she puts into one of these articles, and she puts these out like every week, and it's impressive. On top of that, she does 1 to 2 live streams a week, has a full-time job, and a family, and is a home, maintains a home. Remarkable. So support her independent journalism, and she's completely user-funded like the rest of us. She's been doing a lot of deep dives from Epstein to Peter Thiel to J.D. Vance to discovering this massive network of well-connected, wealthy people that have all put stake in J.D. Vance, technocracy, Les Wexner, and the Epstein class, and their inflated personalities on top of it. J.D. Vance being one of them. So this was about 10 days ago. She published this article, and it's extensive. So this might take a little longer than going past midnight. All right. Vance can fight her. Vance was her senator because she lives in Ohio. So this is very personal to her. All right. All the stuff with Wexner, very personal to her. So getting back to this, again, Peter Thiel's secret political network is already planning life after Trump. When these people say liberal democracy has failed, they're not talking about the left. They're talking about the American experiment itself. And Jesse Jett has a song that's one of my favorite called The Great Experiment, talking about So We End the Great Experiment. And he actually had published and written that song before January 6th. And he talked about breaching the walls of Congress and letting people in and basically trampling the thing and quartering the Congress. It was prophetic, as he is prone to do occasionally. And you'll see that this is kind of a prophetic article in some ways, that you'll see a lot of this develop down the road. And this is what we like to do here, is look at where is this all going. And so I'm going to blow this up a little bit more so you can read it a little bit clearer with me. Rockbridge, Ohio is not a town. It's not a village. It's not, technically speaking, much of anything at all. The federal government, which has an opinion about everything, classifies it as a census-designated place, which is the official term for a community that has 160 people, a post office, a zip code, and the good sense not to overstate its own importance. You wouldn't stop there unless you had a reason. And in the autumn of 2019, under the roof of an inn in a town that barely exists, several $1 billion of net worth, including Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, Rebecca Mercer, and Chris Buskirk, sat down together and got to work. See, 2019 was a very transformational year for J.D. Vance, if you happen to believe in coincidence, which we don't. He moved to Ohio. He converted to Catholicism, and so began the formal process of political transformation that Peter Thiel had been architecting for years. And there's a whole link about his conversion to Catholicism, and this was from the Lamp magazine, How I Joined the Resistance. By 2022, Vance was a senator. Peter Thiel's $15 million got him there, along with other donations from billionaires and millionaires alike. Millionaires and billionaires. And here's the happy quadrant. Rebecca Mercer. Remember her from the Cambridge Analytica days and the 2016 Trump campaign. We'll get to her in a minute. Chris Buskirk. Probably have never heard of him. J.D. Vance, we know, and Peter Thiel is an anagram for the reptile. Sweaty Pete. It started in early 2021 when Thiel personally walked Vance into Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump, whom Vance had once referred to as America's Hitler for the first time. Time magazine's account of the same meeting attributes it to the suggestion of Tucker Carlson and Trump Jr. and financier Omid Malik, who all begged Trump to give one of his former critics a chance. All people who are major players in this network today. What a surprise. Vance had spent months before that building a relationship with Donald Trump Jr., who lobbied his father to endorse him. And it worked. By 2024, Vance was vice president, but none of that was the end goal or the point. By the way, my speculation, part of how he built that relationship with Donald Trump Jr. was through the public offering of Rumble. Vance was a major shareholder of Rumble. Don Jr. got paid $1 million for his podcast by Rumble. And a lot of people were getting money thrown around quite a bit when the SPAC launched. And it's another connection between the two of them. The point, the thing the people in that room in Hocking County were actually building is the end of American democracy as we know it. So Dissent says, I'm not asking you to simply trust me. I'm asking you to watch a clip of the Vice President of the United States himself, his own words on tape from 2021, before he had any reason to be careful. In September of 2021, while running for Senate, Vance sat down with Jack Murphy, a manosphere influencer similar to Andrew Tate, whose website once published the phrase, "Feminists need rape." That's his thing, not me. This was not an accident of booking with a bad guy. This was Vance on his way to the United States Senate, choosing his audience quite deliberately. By the way, Joe Kent chose a similar type of path. Here are some highlights from the interview. You can watch the full interview, which is nearly 2 hours long, by clicking this link. And look, he's wearing guy liner here. You can clearly tell. Let's see this video.
So almost the thing that you need to do, step one in the process, is to totally replace, like rip out like a tumor, the current American leadership class, and then reinstall some sense of American, political religion, some sense of shared values. And then from there, then you can have successful assimilation. This is why I think conservatism has to be a counter-revolutionary force at this moment. We're not just talking about assimilating new immigrants into a American culture. We're talking about replacing garbage elite culture with traditional American culture. That's in some ways a hell of a lot larger of a lift.
Garbage elite
I had
culture
several
and
follow-up
American
questions loaded, but you said something that I would like to zero down on. How do we effectively, quote, rip out the disgusting leadership class?
Oh man, I mean,
because let me expand on that just a second, because and I'm going to give you a little cover here, because it's not just, obviously elections, that's one thing. Okay. But unfortunately, this evil leadership class has already taken over all of our institutions, all of the media, all of the academy, all of our corporations, every educational institution, every arts and culture institution, even every freaking sporting institution that we've had. Yeah. So how, and I agree with you. I agree with you in everything that you said in terms of we're assimilating people into a garbage culture that's teaching them to hate America. So that is our current pipeline, right? From K through 12 through the universities. What other options do we have besides voting them out, which we're seeing is ineffectual?
Yeah. So again, this is like a tough question, but this is maybe the question that confronts us right now, right? So
yes.
Okay. So one model is, what happened to Germany after the Nazis lost, or what happened to the Iraqis after we threw Saddam Hussein out. And, denazification, de-Baathification, there was this massive recognition that you couldn't just put, replace the bad people, replace the bad.
Okay. So what he's talking about is deprogramming Democrats to the equivalent of Nazis. All right. You build back the administration. All right.
The founding fathers actually created a very powerful chief executive, a very powerful president. But if he can't even fire the people in his own administration, is this really a successful republic? So a lot of conservatives have said we should deconstruct the administrative state. We should basically eliminate the administrative state. And I'm sympathetic to that project. But another option is that we should just seize the administrative state for our own purposes. We should fire all of the people.
Seize the administrative state.
Run again in 2024. I think he'll probably win again in 2024, and he'll win by a margin such that he will be the president of the United States in January of 2025. I think that what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people, and when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it. If we continue to let bureaucrats control the entire country, even when Republicans win elections, then we've lost. We've just permanently lost. We've permanently given up. And so that's sort of how I think about this, is that, okay, so you do that, and then what do you do at the Department of Education? Well, you do what Viktor Orban has done in Hungary. You're not allowed to do those things and get $1 of federal money or $1 of state money. And that funding will dry up very quickly. And then, you actually just, I think, go down American institutions and make it possible for conservatives to actually govern and succeed in these institutions in a way where they're currently cut out. That's basically my strategy, is deinstitutionalize the left, reinstitutionalize the right. It is very hard. It will require men and women of incredible courage. But I don't see another way out. I mean, I really can't get over how
another
crazy
way
things have
out.
gotten. And if you're not recognizing in this moment how crazy things have gotten and how outside the box we need to think, then I think you're ultimately not really serious about taking back the country.
I agree. And I got to say,
now that is 2 years or 3 years before he becomes vice president. Now he's already been talking with Thiel and Mercer and all these people. In this interview, he name drops Curtis Yarvin, a blogger who spent years building a following around a single core idea that democracy is a failed experiment and should be replaced with something closer to monarchy, the corporate state. Vance goes on to say that universities need to be attacked honestly and aggressively. And then Vance described America as being in a late Republican period, whatever the fuck that means. If you did not study Roman history, here's what that means. Rome's late Republican period is the moment just before Caesar crossed the Rubicon, defied the Senate, and made himself dictator for life. It's how historians describe the last days of a republic that did not know it was dying. And I don't think that it's going to be Trump that does that, by the way. I think that might be the Republican Party itself that seizes the ballot and seizes the vote to rig it so that nothing but Republicans win across the board. Even in areas where people know it was rigged, they'll challenge it and they won't get a response. All right, because Trump is already going to take over the Gaza, whatever the new thing is, he's going to be king of whatever that board is, the Board of Peace. He's lifetime appointment once he steps out as president. At the end of Rome, the institutions were still standing. The votes were still being counted. The Senate was still meeting. The Republic was already over, but it just hadn't made the announcement yet. When Vance used that phrase in 2021, he wasn't reflecting on history. He was telling anyone paying close enough attention that the courts, the universities, the democratic norms standing between this network and total power were the Roman Senate, and that someone was already sharpening a knife. He said all this publicly on an alt-right podcast while running for Senate. Nobody important was listening. They counted on that too. They love to tell on themselves in places where they think we can't hear them. The name Dominic Michael Trippi comes to mind as well, by the way. So here she talks about this network that's built to last, but also built to hide. The network they built has no website, no public office, no press releases. What it has instead is a structure, a deliberate and layered architecture designed to move hundreds of millions of dollars while leaving as few fingerprints as possible. Laundering. At the top sits Rockbridge Network, LLC. The business at the top is not a nonprofit. It's not a PAC. Yet it oversees dozens of entities that move billions of dollars through nonprofits, super PACs, and a venture capital fund, most of it shielded from public disclosure. Because why not? Rockbridge was able to start because of initial funding from Rebecca Mercer, who was in that room in Ohio in 2019. We know her well because she's the daughter of billionaire hedge fund manager Robert Mercer and directs the Mercer Family Foundation, overseeing day-to-day operations of the family's vast political projects. She co-founded 1789 Capital and sits on the board of the Heritage Foundation, which of course famously created Project 2025, and before that, Obamacare, which before that was Romney Care. The Affordable Care Act. She was a primary person behind Steve Bannon's rise and funded him, a primary funder of Breitbart magazine and Andrew Breitbart, and an architect of the Cambridge Analytica scheme. That was where they profiled everybody on Facebook, classified them into one of these personality types, and then marketed specifically to them to try to influence them about the election. There was a big Netflix special about it. She wastes no breath on public pageantry. Her purse holds all the eloquence she needs. Why does Rebecca need to say anything? It's a textbook example of the éminence grise dynamique, named after Père Joseph, the right-hand man to Cardinal Richelieu in the 17th century. I'm not that great with French. Historically, the most successful shadow operators realized that standing in the spotlight just makes you an easy target. And the network they created, Rockbridge Network, is a perfect for that. Is a perfect explanation for that. Is a private, for-profit, limited liability company. It's incorporated in Delaware because, of course, Delaware asks the fewest questions. An LLC has no public disclosure obligation for its ownership. The people who actually control the entire operation are legally permitted to remain nameless, and they've taken full advantage of that permission, naturally. Below the holding parent company, the Rockbridge structure fans out into a series of purpose-built vehicles, each with a different legal status and a different function to meet their goals. There are 4 different 501c4 nonprofits that Legacy Media has named, a designation that allows them to spend on politics without ever disclosing their donors. But they can't, I believe, endorse a politician or have direct connection to them. You've got Better Tomorrow, which pays people to knock on doors and drive voters to the polls on Election Day. Benevolent, driving up voter turnout, right? Over the Horizon Action finds new conservative voters, getting them on the rolls and making sure they show up. How do they do that? Faithful in Action, now we're targeting the Catholic Church, turns Sunday sermons into voter mobilization, using the church as a political organizing infrastructure. And then you've got Firebrand Action, which calls itself a journalism nonprofit, but of course what it actually does is fund polling that flows directly into Real Clear Politics and 538, which of course are the 2 most cited polling averages in American political media. So they're using their influence to fund a poll that then injects those results into nationally recognized polling averages. That's a lot of power. Control the data, and you control what everyone believes is true. All 4 of these nonprofits, by the way, list the same phone number on their IRS 990 filings. A 202 Washington, D.C. number. I find that curious. What Peter Thiel and his confidants call a donor network, history may yet call something else entirely. PACs, super PACs, advocacy groups, media firms, fundraising vehicles scattered across multiple states, all connected by a single 10-digit thread that nobody was supposed to pull, but the Scented Bloom did. It's that phone number. The numbers make sense, knowing that Rockbridge now holds semi-annual summits at Four Seasons hotels and the Ritz-Carlton in Key Biscayne, where roughly 250 donors pay between $100,000 and $1 million each for a seat at the table. Their annual budget is $75 million. Buskirk and Omid Malik have created a private membership club in Washington called Executive Branch, where Trump-supporting business leaders pay $500,000 a head to rub shoulders with cabinet officials. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has attended Rockbridge events. It's literally pay for access and pay for play. So has our DNI Tulsi Gabbard. So has RFK Jr., who was gifted a $100,000 speaking fee from one of the network's nonprofits, Over the Horizon Action, just 3 months before he was confirmed to run for HHS secretary. Well, he was a private citizen then who had actually backed out of the race for presidency and was still lobbying Trump for a position. and lobbying Trump for his daughter to become Surgeon General, if I remember correctly. Some crazy thing. Again, this is all part of the network, and you see other faces in there like Tucker Carlson, and I think that's Dinesh D'Souza. Here we go. Known members include Mark Andreessen and David Sachs, Tyler and Cameron Winklevoss. Remember them because they sued Mark Zuckerberg, claiming that they had founded Facebook. But they ended up founding Bitcoin, being involved in the launch of Bitcoin. Commerce Secretary Howard Nutlick. PayPal Mafia co-founders Ken Howry and Luke Nosek. Those are other guys that you never really hear much of. Here's another name I want you to pay close attention to that most people don't know. Blake Masters. All right. Blake Masters is, to me, another J.D. Vance. Another guy that they've assembled and have waiting in the wings. Should something go down and they need to put someone that they know and can trust and control and put in charge, Blake Masters is one of those guys. And then, of course, Tucker Carlson, funny enough, who was in the room in that first meeting in Ohio. Jimmy Dore's good friend, right? Each of them pays between $100,000 and $1 million a year for the privilege of being in the room. Of course, with their net worths, that's all just a drop in the bucket to them. The Super PAC's top donors in 2024 included Wisconsin roofing billionaire Diane Hendricks at roughly $11 million, Energy Transfer Partners CEO Kelsey Warren at $10 million, and Richard Uihlein, who funneled $2.5 million through his own restoration PAC. That same phone number also appears on the filings for American Mission Florida, a state-level PAC. Okay. In early 2026, American Mission Florida received $3 million from Leading the Future. Remember, that's one of the Rockbridge 501c4s. A $100 million Silicon Valley super PAC. Okay, sorry, wrong one. This is Leading the Future is this $100 million Silicon Valley super PAC backed by Andreessen Horowitz, Greg Brockman from OpenAI, and Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale. That's built to push AI-friendly candidates into Congress during the midterms. Right. That's the one. Everything Future, by the way, and Robbie Yeager has this. Everything Future involves Democrats as well. Future forward, future this, future that. Okay. So there's the filings with the Florida State Department Division of Elections. The money flows from Silicon Valley through a super PAC in Henderson, Nevada, and lands in a Florida PAC that shares its phone number and compliance infrastructure with the Rockbridge network. Mark Andreessen, remember, is already a confirmed Rockbridge member. The same people keep showing up on both sides of these transactions, wearing different hats each time. Remember also, speaking of wearing different hats on either side of a transaction, that Andreessen Horowitz both is an investor in Substack as well as Stripe. So they're getting paid both when Substack makes money off of a paid Substack, but also when Stripe gets paid, handles the payout because they're the exclusive provider for Substack. So let's get to this architecture of anonymity. And Dissent says that she knows this is a lot of data, and many of us are wondering, how does all this money actually move? She actually draws it and diagrams it out. Start at the top. A wealthy donor writes a check to Rockbridge Network, LLC. Because it's a private LLC, there's no legal requirement to disclose who that donor is. Their name never appears anywhere. That's weird. I mean, I figured there would need to be some kind of ledger accounting for the money and where it came from. You've got credits and debits and just general accounting. But this is what happens. Rockbridge, then they launder it. They pass that money down to Better Tomorrow or another one of the 501c4 nonprofits under their umbrella. Because of the way 501c4s work, they don't have to disclose where its money came from either. The donor has now disappeared behind 2 layers of legal protection. From there, the nonprofit sends grants to the other nonprofits in the network, like Over the Horizon Action. faithful in action and firebrand action, or in friendly adjacent ones. Turning point action, for example. On paper, these look like separate organizations making independent decisions, but in reality, it's the same handful of people that run all of them. And remember, they all share a phone number. Chris Buskirk is an Arizona insurance entrepreneur most Americans couldn't pick out of a lineup. He is president or leader of nearly every node in this network simultaneously. He runs the Super PAC. He founded the nonprofits, and he co-founded both 1789 Capital with Rebecca Mercer and the Rockbridge Network itself. This is the linchpin. In the words of Orrin Cass, who was also in that room in Ohio, Buskirk is the convener of that ecosystem. Jana Rutland is the network's treasurer, the financial plumbing connecting the donor side to the spending side. But Jana doesn't work for Rockbridge. She works for a company called the Crosby-Ottenhoff Group, a political compliance firm based in Chicago, run by Caleb Crosby and Benjamin Ottenhoff. Again, another, I'm guessing, two more members of this network. What do they do? Well, PACs and nonprofits are legally required to name a treasurer on their filings. Crosby Ottenhoff rents one out. Treasurer for rent. Rutland is that person for Rockbridge. This sounds like the person that rubber stamped stuff for the Election Assistance Commission, which is another article that Dissent and Bloom had written about. So Rutland is that person for Rockbridge and many other companies and organizations. He's listed as a treasurer on dozens of political organizations simultaneously, from Rockbridge's nonprofits to Winning for Women to the White Coat Waste PAC to Save Our Country PAC and many, many more. There we go. There's that diagram, that launder funnel that I'm showing you that goes from the donors through Rockbridge, spread out to the 501c4s, and then disseminated both amongst themselves, but also to these field operations, ad buys, and polling data. Again, the phone number that appears on all of these filings isn't Rockbridge's number. It's Crosby Ottenhoff's. That's why it shows up on hundreds of organizations. It's the compliance firm's switchboard. You're not getting anybody at the company. Rutland isn't just signing paperwork. She is the financial plumbing connecting the donor side to the spending side of the entire operation. She's the treasurer of the Rockbridge entities and is also named on the filings of Red Eagle Media Corp., which was paid $56 million by Republican political committees in the 2024 cycle to place their advertising. Red Eagle is actually a fictitious business name in Virginia for National Media Research Planning and Placement, the same company implicated in allegedly illegal coordination between the NRA and the Trump campaign all the way back in 2016. Oops. The Campaign Legal Center has already filed FEC complaints alleging that Crosby Ottenhoff ran shell super PAC arrangements. Jana Rutland has no public profile and has never given an interview. Yet, she controls the flow of tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, and almost nobody knows her name. In these types of operations, that's by design. By the time the money exits the system as field operations, ad buys, or pollings, it's been laundered or has passed through 3 or 4 different entities controlled by the same 2 or 3 people. The original donors, of course, are invisible. Every step is technically legal and tax deductible on top of it. Now we get to their patriotic capitalism. And then we, of course, have to talk about the venture capital arm of Rockbridge, 1789 Capital. The venture capital firm was co-founded in 2022 by Mercer, Buskirk, and Omid Malik, with Trump Jr. joining as a partner after the 2024 election. They call it patriotic capitalism. I believe 1789 Capital also was involved with Rumble. By 2026, 1789 Capital, which has over $1 billion in assets now, has invested in roughly 30 companies. They say the fastest way to a man's loyalty is through his wallet and his ambition. And at 1789 Capital, they deal in both. And here's a list of the companies that are included, but are not limited to. Firehawk Aerospace, a startup using 3D printing to make rocket fuel in just a few hours, rather than the usual 2 months. Hadrian, a company that uses AI to run automated factories for military and aerospace equipment. That's not too frightening now. Vulcan Elements, a small company that makes special magnets. Just 3 months after 1789 invested in them, the Pentagon gave them a record-breaking $620 million loan. I wonder if somebody from Rockbridge walked them in the door. All three of these companies, which are linked to the current Vice President of the United States and his friends, now have millions of dollars in government contracts. Nothing to see here, folks. They are not separate events, but instead all connected. As AI needs rare earth minerals, you can't build the chips, data centers, or energy systems without them, and China controls almost all the global supply. Now remember this, every time you see the Trump admin making moves on rare earth minerals and AI, whether it's Project Vault, the 2025 Critical Mineral Executive Orders, or the mineral deals they're cutting with countries like Australia, Japan, Ukraine, Saudi Arabia. Remember also Argentina, $40 billion now we're giving them. Trump declared a national security emergency, which let him skip normal bidding rules and pour hundreds of millions in Pentagon money into companies like Vulcan Elements. Oh, the catch? The president's son's firm, 1789 Capital, had just invested in Vulcan 3 months earlier. So son gets in his father's ear and says, Dad, we need to give these guys the money. And of course, that's going to directly profit Don Jr. So to review, Trump's son invested first. The Pentagon's hundreds of millions came 3 months later. No review, no competition, no questions asked. Your taxes, their profit. Then we have the final link here, which is common good Catholicism. There's one more thing that the nonprofits share, and it's one of the most disturbing. Read the 990 filings. She did. All of them have in their mission statements, their goal is to further the common good. What does that mean? The phrase sounds harmless, but it's not. The common good is the central organizing idea of a political movement called post-liberal common good Catholicism. And it has a very specific meaning. The liberal democracy has failed, that individual rights have atomized society, and that the state must be redirected by a counter-elite who will impose a moral order from above, whether the public asks for it or not. A professor named Deneen wrote a whole book saying America needs a new ruling class. Vance wrote an official blurb for his book, Regime Change. The blurb states, Deneen does more than show how our present ruling class has declared war on beauty, tradition, and the social institutions that make life worth living. He articulates a vision for populist politics that can rebuild what's been torn down. The funny thing is that the person that helped build what he wants to tear down is Epstein and Thiel. But then, of course, Thiel wants to rebuild whatever comes out of the ashes and get a chance to fuck it up a second time. How about hell no? Okay? What a mess. I mean, fuck these people. They're such clowns. Vance is their guy in politics. He converted to Catholicism. He buddied up with the Heritage Foundation and still name drops Deneen publicly. Vance wrote the official foreword for Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts' book, Dawn's Early Light, Taking Back Washington to Save America. These guys are all religious zealot crusaders. And here's a look at the language. The old conservative money used words like prosperity and freedom. The new right picks names like better tomorrow and faithful in action. The way that they conflate Zionism and Judaism is the same way they conflate politics and religion. And before your eyes glaze over at the phrase liberal democracy, understand what it actually means. It doesn't mean progressive politics. It doesn't mean the Democratic Party. Liberal democracy is the system of government the United States was built upon. It's the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the separation of powers, free elections, individual liberty, and the idea that the government answers to the people rather than the other way around. It's America as we know it. Also a separation of church and state, not just powers. When these people say liberal democracy has failed, they're not talking about the left. They're talking about the American experiment itself. And so we end the great experiment. How? Well, there's two ways, the 22nd and 25th. Members of Congress from both parties are formally calling for the president's removal under the 25th Amendment because they've let him run unhinged like a fucking lunatic. The Rockbridge Network has been patient. They may not need to be patient much longer. The only thing standing between Vance and the Oval Office right now is Donald Trump, a man whose public decline the nation watches in real time, and who forms his understanding of the world primarily through whatever Fox News decides to show him that morning, and whatever his aides allow him to see. In September of 2025, Trump mobilized federal troops against American citizens because Fox News showed him 5-year-old protest footage and told him it was happening now. Oregon's governor had to call Trump personally to explain that the courthouse he thought was under attack was not under attack. A man this responsive to whatever is put in front of him isn't running the country. He's being run. What the ever-elusive Rockbridge Network has built isn't simply another dark money political network. It is a succession plan. If Vance reaches the Oval Office after January of next year, the 22nd Amendment allows him to serve for nearly a decade. I know what you're thinking. Vance is inelectable. He isn't as popular as Trump. And right now, you're not wrong. As of April 2026, Vance holds the worst approval rating of any vice president at this stage in office, including Kamala Harris, amazingly enough. A 21-point swing in the wrong direction since January of 2025. Rockbridge isn't waiting for Vance to become popular. They're building a country in which popularity matters less than infrastructure. Since 2021, before Vance won the Senate on Thiel's money, they funded redistricting efforts, voter turnout operations in swing states, and litigation designed to rewrite election law. Their own internal planning documents put $3.75 million toward rewriting election law. $3 billion for what they called literally a government in waiting, and $6 to $8 million per state in Arizona, Nevada, and Michigan, the states where they intend to challenge the ballot the hardest. And this wasn't some abstract plan. James Blair was running polling for the network's nonprofit. He then left to become Trump's political campaign director. After the election, he got named the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. Pretty powerful job. The guy went from the network right into the West Wing. This is the Koch model. turbocharged and stripped of its libertarian pretense. Charles Koch publicly opposed Trump and lost his influence after 2018, and Rockbridge was purpose-built in 2019 to replace him. They're not playing for the next election. They're playing for the foundation of every election after it. Remember the purchase of Dominion voting systems as well to a Republican-friendly donor. And likely somebody involved with this network would be my guess. Trump was never the destination. He was the vehicle. And the people who were in that room in Ohio are still driving. People love to comfort themselves by saying that Rome wasn't built in a day. They conveniently forget that it didn't fall in one either. It crumbled slowly, imperceptibly, while very smart people stood around arguing over the acoustics in the Colosseum. That's a really good article. Okay, and it got her a lot of praise and a lot of comments and likes. And you should go and like it as well. We will definitely be linking it in the description afterwards. At some point, I will be talking to her about it, maybe on the stream. Well, I know she talked about this article a little bit on ProPilled. I know she didn't read through the whole thing, though. But yeah, good line at the end. Agreed. Wow, a lot to that. And again, they put her together. They've put Vance together. They control him. And if it ain't going to be Vance, they've got people ready to step in and replace him. These people are incredibly powerful and they're ruthless. They will take out anyone they need to take out and do it from behind the shadows with no accountability. All right. So, if you like reading stories like that, support Dissent and Bloom, but also support INN. Wrong one. That one. Because we need user funding. We're totally user funded. We depend on that. Ways to do that there. Cash App, $ Indie News Network on your phone. co-fi.com/Indie News Network would actually show something on screen. PayPal.me/Indie News Network and Patreon.com/Indie News Network for monthly. Yeah, the name of the show is IndieNewsNow.com, Indie News Now Live, because there's a website called IndieNewsNow.com where a lot of these articles that I read tonight you can find, at least links to them. But there's also a way to leave a tip for the network and purchase merch like the Shandamaster Fuck Cancer collection, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. Finally, if you want to, over on Substack, we're live over there as well at IndieMediaToday.com. I also publish a newsletter at INNNewsletter.com where you can get a weekly update on Friday afternoons and 3 or 4 different network podcasts throughout the week as well. Okay. Next. We are up to the lightning round. Yay. Yeah, that was an excellent article. And she wrote another article this week, by the way. It's like a follow-up, another J.D. Vance article about like how they put him together. And she did a whole research thing about the Catholic Church and his involvement in how they built him up and brought him into their fold as well, because he wasn't raised Catholic. He then had this, epiphany of faith, like a lot of these politicians seem to do. Okay. Let's get to lightning round. First, this is really cool. Isabel, who I've never heard of, all right, is Isarik Sopuro. All right, now, the only thing here is that she is a student at the University of Washington, all right, exploring tech and public policy. I'm not going to say there was a lot of NGO money flowing through University of Washington, Stanford, and other universities specific that were involved in the censorship industrial complex. And I remember when I saw that, the University of Washington stuck out to me. I don't know if there's a connection. But what she did is really cool. Not all heroes wear capes. I made a map to monitor data centers all around the world. It tracks construction, nearby power plants, local AI legislation, and follows the politicians behind their bans and if they're getting paid to do so. Holy shit. Okay? So this is a little video, 30 seconds, showing how this works. That you click into a state, and you can see how many plants, where it is, the companies, legislation, all over the country. And now it's worldwide. And these are the links and news articles and how they're collating that data. All right. And the website, again, is called trackpolicy.org. All right. Let's just say I'm going to click on the United States. I'm going to do this live. I personally reside in the state of New Jersey. So I click on New Jersey. Okay. And I was able to, I zoomed in there. All right, you can see how many data centers are operational. There's one at Yards Creek Energy, and how much energy is it using? Okay, what's under construction and what's being proposed? Unreal. Showing the counties where they're, and then the size of the facilities that sit nearby. Natural gas facilities. This is what would power the data center. You've got several in Angels area, Angels in the Trenton area, down close to here. Burlington. Okay. So that is trackpolicy.org. Go explore it and have fun at your state. Aaron Brockovich, by the way, is also getting involved now in tracking data center stuff. Number 2, Aaron Brockovich, by the way, is an Indie Media Award honoree. About a month ago, I did a story about the Julian Assange archive, and that there was going to be a symposium at the in mid-March in Germany, talking about what WikiLeaks impact had. And much, it kind of happened without much fanfare. I didn't even get a link or see anybody posting a link to this, but you can actually go back and watch all of these panel discussions that had some pretty heavy hitters. I mean, Matt Kennard from Declassified UK was on this one, and Chip Gibbons from The Dissenter was on that one. And you had Stefania Marizzi on this one. Kirsten Hernassen, who's one of who's right now the editor of WikiLeaks in chief. All right. You had a bunch of different panel discussions, and you can go back and watch all of them here at this disruptionlab.org. And apparently they're going to have more of these symposiums. And then later on this summer, there will be an exhibit in Germany to display all the items that they've been archiving for the Julian Assange archive. Really kind of excited to see that that launch. Next, another Indie Media Award honoree and antiwar.com and Dave DeCamp both. This one, so, it infuriated me, and at the same time, I'm like, that's just so Trump. The cost of the Iran war isn't even included in his $1.5 trillion fucking budget request. Oh my God. Really? So on top of the $1.5 trillion, we've got to shell out however many more billions. We know that it costs at least $20 billion for the first week. And we're now in week 8 or 9. So extrapolate that out. We've also depleted, as we've seen, a good portion of our munitions, which is going to cost us $1.5 trillion just this year, next year, to start to replenish. Unbelievable. The cost of the U.S. war with Iran wasn't included in the request for the massive $1.5 trillion military budget for 2027, according to a Pentagon budget official. This budget was formulated honestly before we even went into conflict with them. The record-shattering budget's nearly a 50% increase over this year's $1 trillion budget. But the Trump admin is going to ask Congress for even more military spending to make up for depleted weapons and other military operations related to Iran. Fuck you. Take those weapons and shove them up your ass. So no, don't forget about his ballroom slash, whatever their bunker thing they're building there. Initial report said the administration was planning to request another $200 billion for the war, but the number may be revised down to 80 or 100. Doesn't matter. They've already spent a good portion of it. Then, of course, you got Rushel Vogt, who was the architect of Project 2025, told the lawmakers that he didn't even have a ballpark estimate to share because it doesn't really matter. They're going to spend whatever they're going to spend. Nobody's going to stop them. A war cost tracker using the minimum conservative estimates say that it's already cost $60 billion. In just the first 6 days, the cost in munitions alone was $11 billion. And I brought that Steve Semler article that said that the first week was at least 18 or 19 billion, and that the administration was underselling that. So fuck the administration for all that. Fuck the Pentagon. Stop funding war. Stop funding these assholes. Say no. But of course, they never do. Next, Robbie Yeager shared this. Now again, Indie Media Award honoree, independent journalist Robbie Yeager, one of my favorite money chasers, who recently came back. I did a story about that. He's been tracking the money, trying to track dark money from the 2026 election. Where's it coming from? Where's it going? And he shared this video about AIPAC Tracker. And I know we've shared stuff about our concerns with AIPAC Tracker. And I think this falls in line with what we already know. So what Robbie starts off by saying is that I should start by saying that I'm anti-AIPAC, anti-J Street, anti-Super PAC, special interests, and dark money in general, period. Any one of you who followed me over the years knows this. This guy Nico here is pointing out something crucial, that we also have to watch the Watchmen. Who are the Watchmen? Well, in this case, it's Track AIPAC. And let's go back and watch this from the beginning.
AIPAC's methodology. Now, since then, we've reached out to them for a meeting to discuss how their methodology could be improved. We want to be as transparent as possible about what we will present to them in that meeting so that y'all know what our intentions are and don't just think we're being paid off by Bibi. Joking, but seriously, for us, it's always been AIPAC, but we have two major concerns with Track AIPAC's methodology, and yes, they are major. Number one, we still have a problem with their definition of a pro-Israel lobby donor being anyone who's ever given an itemized donation to any of the 67 PACs that they track. By that methodology, this should be AOC's total, this should be Ilhan Omar's total, this should be Rashida Tlaib's total, this should be Bernie Sanders' total, if they were being consistent. When reached for comment on this, Track AIPAC says that it has always used a combination of the spending by the Israel lobby and the politicians' policy positions when making graphics. However, not only do we find this methodology sloppy, but the journalist who Track AIPAC cites as the reason for changing their methodology said this to us. My reporting on Illinois' 9th Congressional District primary required deep investigative reporting on AIPAC's fundraising efforts. Applying the same facts broadly without the same confirmation or work could absolutely lead to glaring inconsistencies and raise more questions than the ones it seeks to answer. So that's the first problem. The second issue we found might be even worse. After talking with researcher Tyson Brody, we believe that they are double counting millions of dollars of donations. This is because they're counting Schedule B earmark disbursements from the pro-Israel PACs and the same earmark donations when they appear in the candidate Schedule A disclosures. If that made any sense to you, please go outside, touch some grass, but essentially it means that they're counting the money when it comes out of the PAC and when it comes into the candidate. Long story short, the numbers in Track AIPAC's graphics, we are pretty confident, are wrong. Our intention is to work with them to make them right. We are doing this process publicly because we think it's important to call out misinformation, and unfortunately, at this point in time, Track AIPAC's graphics are misinformation despite what their intentions might be. We'll be reporting back to y'all.
Interesting. So they're actually overstating just how much they're taking, in some cases double. And we personally have had issue with them simping for progressive Democrats that seem to align with their policy positions in some ways, but their vote doesn't. And they have simped for AOC.
Last week,
and
we
specifically,
made a video about
let me
a large
mute this.
concern we have with
I got into it with Gen X Girl over this, who has personally spoken with them. Now, these guys have also now, the Track AIPAC people, gone on breaking points. So they have gone on specific corporate media aligned shows with, that appeal to certain audiences. All right, but not going to. But yeah, no, we got to watch The Watchmen. Fuck this. And I'm not a fan of what Track AIPAC. I mean, I get what they're doing, and I think it's important to know how much each one of these candidates is actually getting. But if the number that's on that graphic is overstated, it delegitimizes the entire project itself, because then the politician dismisses it to say they can't even add. What do you mean? This is completely misleading and misinforming. And they're not wrong. But thank you, Robbie, for sharing that. All right. So next, finally, Indie News Now. I've been talking about it all night. This really pissed me off. Why is the Dre dossier talking with Cory Booker? How is the Dre dossier talking with Cory Booker? Because she's talking about the merger, the takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery by Skydance. She's been doing a lot of Larry Ellison background. But I would not entertain that clown propagandist piece of shit AIPAC Zionist for 3 seconds, or believe any fucking word that came out of his mouth, and certainly wouldn't give him my platform to anybody else and give it any credibility other than to call him out for being a piece of shit. Fuck her for that. All right. You've got Israel-Palestine news. CBS News ousting a bureau chief over a spat with Barry Weiss over Gaza. What a shock. And again, this refreshes 24/7. So this, I ran this before the show. If I refresh it now, it will push those stories down and replace it with new ones. So anti-war news came out from both Dave DeCamp's Substack as well as Odyssey. So we're going to pull that there. This is also, again, where we get the merch, and you can pick up t-shirts or stickers or Jandamasta Fuck Cancer collection, or INN shirts or beanies or tank tops, all here at the merch store. All right. Finally, thank you, everyone. We're going to do support independent media because we need it more than ever. Those are the ways to do it. Cash App, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network, paypal.me, or patreon.com/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com, I just showed you. Again, let me go back there for 1 second and show you the Keep the News Free section over here. Go back to the top of this one. And here is the Keep the News Free. This is where you can put in credit card or any other way to support us, Cash App, Pay, bank account, name it, for any amount of your choosing. Okay, getting back here. So that's at IndieNewsNow.com. Then we've got Substack, IndieMediaToday.com, and at INNNewsletter.com. Okay. Finally, we get to our GoFundMes. And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on them tonight because I know I'm running long already, but it's always important. We've been talking about Natalia's case for close to a year already. Natalia was stopped on a routine traffic stop. Zenton Bloom, who we read an article of earlier, she wrote an article about Natalia and about the business of traffic stops in Ohio and the business that Ohio has made on housing ICE detention and how much they're getting paid per day to do that. And their incentive to keep people there and potentially torture people there into self-deporting rather than going through the appeal process. Horrible stuff. Yeah. Freedom for Natalia is right. Thank you, cookies. Okay. Earlier this month, our friend Cowboy Kitty, who started this GoFundMe on behalf of Natalia, talked to her on the phone, scribbled some notes down, which I blew up and showed in detail about how they were getting substandard food and they weren't allowed to see sunlight and there weren't any people there that spoke her language, Ukrainian, and that she has asylum and she's willing to talk if she ever gets a chance, but that there were things that she was afraid to say on on the phone on a monitored line about what was happening there. Really sad. So please, if you're able to, I'm going to drop a link to her GoFundMe into all the chats on all the platforms
about so that if you have even $10 makes a big difference. It really, like, just pumping that number a little bit each day or each week really, really does make a difference. Thank you for that. Next, we've got Justice for Aspen. Unfortunately, we've been talking about Justice for Aspen for close to a year, too. Aspen was a passenger in an RV. They went to a music festival in Florida, and on the way back, they were pulled over in Georgia. The vehicle was searched, and the cops found mass quantities of drugs and accused everybody and charged everybody in the RV with trafficking. She did not know that the drugs were there. The driver admitted and told the cop that she did not know the drugs were there and had nothing to do with it. They didn't care. She spent more than 2 weeks in a Georgia lockup, and she's now facing decades in prison, like 3 decades. We need help to fund her defense. The Sentin Bloom wrote an article explaining her situation and talking about just how awful Georgia prisons are where she was and how badly they treat autists and vegetarians, of which she is both. I did one-on-one interview with Aspen and her mother, Halo Benson, who I know from our Assange activism days. And Halo's like family, as is Aspen. Aspen's an artist. You can subscribe and you can purchase some of her art from the Art Spin Studio, which I believe is over here. Okay. There's ways to support and help her fund her defense. And she needs to hire experts and lawyers in order to get her sprung. And I don't know how it's going to happen, but we're hoping, and we need money to fund people that could sow that kind of doubt in a jury, in a judge, and get a mistrial declared, for example, or find evidence that exonerates her or whatever it is. Yes, KYE 30 years, fuck is right. All right. We did a fundraiser live stream back at the end of October. Jesse Jett played a benefit concert. The ways to find all of these links for Aspen, by the way, is linktr.ee/justice and the number 4 Aspen. I'm dropping that into all of the chats now so everybody can see and visit that at their convenience. And there is, of course, a GoFundMe for Aspen, which has stalled out at just over the first goal of $12,500. But Halo told me they were going to need $50,000, $60,000 to fund all these experts and lawyers, at least. And then there's living expenses while she's having to do all that. Okay, and they're hanging in there, by the way. I check in with Halo and ask how Aspen's doing and ask how they're doing. Because they're family and because we actually do care. And then we have Shanda. Shanda, we lost earlier this month. She lost her fight with cancer. She went through 4 rounds and she fought valiantly. Stage 4 small cell lung cancer. Throw up your sunflowers for Shanda in the chat. I announced a couple weeks ago that we created the Shanda Master Fuck Cancer collection. The first of those orders went out today, was my understanding. Our friend Oz ordered a hoodie to be delivered to him in Washington. But you can purchase a tank top or a hoodie or a men or women's t-shirt. And the t-shirts are $20, hoodies $27, tank tops $19. We're not trying to make money, but any profits that we do have would go towards Shanda's final expenses. And then once that's taken care of, be swung towards some cancer charity. We miss Shanda. We love her. This past Saturday night, Oz, the Boomer, and Pasta hosted a memorial video, a tribute live stream, where he actually used the graphic that I made for the t-shirt. I was so honored. And he started it out with my tribute, reading everybody's tweets from the show a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, it means so much to me. And then Oz and Pasta, who of course was a great friend of Shanda's and had flown up to see her in her last days and had done a show with her called To Hell and Back. Fiorella joined in and dialed into the live stream at some point, and they also showed there was that live stream fundraiser that they had done for her after she was first diagnosed, and then there was my message of my memory of Shanda, and I shared a couple of screen caps from one of the only other people that I've ever had co-host a news show with me, and that means a lot. I miss her tremendously. And people have been telling our friend Oz that he needs to come back already. And I hope he does when he's ready. And he again shouted out the shop collection for merch. And then he went through a slideshow and a dedication to everybody else. And then look at that. He even played Jesse and Jess doing 13 from the last episode of American Tradition.
And it was pretty awesome getting to meet her there and getting to do that with them. It was a small group of us just walking through the streets of DC together, man. I'll never fucking forget it, man.
They were talking about the Assange rally, the Free Assange rally. So go back and watch this live stream. I will definitely link to this in the chats as well. And remember that there are still final expenses due for Shanda, and that her GoFundMe is open. So if you're able to drop a couple of bucks to help her family with those expenses and the medical bills that are still coming in, please do. Again, just a reminder that Shanda is a 2023 Indie Media Award honoree for excellence in podcasting and live streaming. And man, her legacy is large and will not be forgotten. And that also, this graphic also was shown at the end of their stream. Again, it means so much to me that Oz included and incorporated so much of what we do here in dedicating to her and to her legacy and to keeping her memory alive. So thank you for all that and for indulging me. Fuck cancer. And we miss you, Shanda. All right. That's it. I'm spent. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. I love you all. And what else? We'll be back again tomorrow night. INN News, Reef and Colin. Thursday night, I'll be live with Jesse Jett. Friday, Angel in the afternoon. Saturday will be Pro Wrestling Talk. Sunday, boats smashing into other boats. And then we'll be back here next Tuesday night for another episode of Indie News Now Live. So thank you to everyone who's been hanging out tonight. I really love you all. I really appreciate the support. Support independent media, again, because we need it more than ever. And I will see you next Tuesday, fam. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind, when I couldn't read between the lines, and when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time. I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry.
My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? So
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat. Couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who will listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's